edition of Checkerboard Chat. We're back here for the first time this fall. We're going to try to be giving these to you every week here in football and basketball season, maybe bring in some different guests, talk a little bit of Lady Vols soccer, Lady Vols volleyball as well. But I am your host, Ryan Schumpert. I am the co-sports editor here at Daily Beacon. I'm with my protege, is that the right word? Also co-sports editor. I don't know if protege is the right word.
No, definitely not.
The Pippin to my, the Jordan to my Pippin, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But we're just going to go and dive right in here. We'll start talking about last Saturday's game against Georgia. Tennessee falls to the Bulldogs for their second straight SEC loss. Let's start. Brian Maurer, his first start. What did you see from the freshman? What did you think from Maurer's performance Saturday?
I think it was impressive, at least for a half, I think he came out and kind of with a lot of confidence throwing the football. Once the second half came around, really actually kind of there towards the end of the second quarter, I think we saw that youth come out, kind of what maybe a lot of people expected to see. But Tennessee fans have got to feel a little confident about where things are headed with Maurer at quarterback. Like I said, throwing the ball, he just looked very confident, fitting the ball in there. You got to be pretty happy with his first ever pass being a 70-yard touchdown. So that's something I'm sure he'll always remember. But, yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be some tough defenses coming up that they'll face. Georgia's about as tough as you can get on defense, I think. So I think there's some positivity now surrounding the offensive side of the ball, at least at the quarterback position. And maybe that's something that this wide receiving core, which is very talented, is a little happy about, that they'll have an opportunity to get the ball now, something they've kind of struggled to do this year. But, yeah, I think it's in a good spot right now at quarterback.
Certainly, I think you saw a good game plan from Jim Chaney for his freshman quarterback. Kept it simple, wanted to take some shots down the field, a lot of RPO timing stuff. Had a lot of success with that in the first half. I thought you saw Georgia kind of what they did to Notre Dame. They went a lot more press coverage second half, started taking away the easy stuff, kind of wearing Tennessee down. But, I mean, that's kind of to be expected. Georgia, much better football team than Tennessee.
You talked about Jim Chaney's game plan. I thought that was maybe the best we've seen all year out of him.
Agreed.
I think it's been tough, and maybe that's because of who they had at quarterback. I think they really thought that Garantano was the guy. I mean, we don't get to see too much of practice, what goes on out there. So maybe Garantano. We talked about this in the press box the other night. Maybe Garantano in practice is definitely the better guy, and Maurer may not have it in practice. So far he seems to have it in the game. Even against Florida, they threw him out there in the swamp for his first. He played a little bit against Chattanooga. That doesn't even compare. So his first SEC experience was against Florida, and even though he made some mistakes, which is to be expected, he led them on their only scoring drive of the game. So maybe he's just a gamer. He can get out there and make plays, and I think Chaney, took advantage of that and probably had his best called game of the year.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of going back to that Florida game, it's hard to compare game to game just because college football is such a weekly sport. But you saw what Florida's defense did to Bo Nix this past weekend. So I think at the time we watched that and we said Brian Maurer's not ready maybe for the moment, but maybe that's just Florida's defense playing at a high level. Like I just said, they gave Bo Nix plenty of problems this week.
And both guys are true freshmen.
Yeah, both guys true freshmen, definitely. So moving into this week, Mississippi State 4-3 coming to Knoxville, 6.5-point favorites over Tennessee. What do you think Bob Shoop's going to be able to do to kind of give Maurer some trouble after Maurer's had a week of tape to put on? I should specify Bob Shoop's Mississippi State's defensive coordinator, formerly Tennessee's defensive coordinator, so he's got some ties here. What do you think he kind of responds with after looking at a week of what Maurer can put on tape, and what can Tennessee do to kind of counteract that?
Well, it's a funny thing you mentioned about Bob Shoop too, because after I wrote the preview yesterday, I kind of thought I probably should have mentioned that. He was here before, so a homecoming of sorts for him. I want to see. I'm interested to see how the turnover battle goes, because we saw Maurer the other day. He had two of them, if I remember correctly. Definitely the one we just watched. The hit there late, the scoop and score, the interception, which he was one of his not better throws of the night. He overshot a guy there and made an easy pick for Georgia. But we see here, 21 straight games for Mississippi State's defense with at least one takeaway. I think that's something they're going to have to try to exploit if you're Mississippi State's defense, is to create turnovers. And, the offensive line for Tennessee, which is played pretty well, I think, considering, they're playing a lot of youth out there, and you got a guy like Trey Smith, obviously, who's kind of game to game. But, yeah, I definitely think that's something, the youth is something they're going to just try to exploit, like everybody's going to do when they play Tennessee this year. So, The turnover battle is the one I'm interested to see because that's really plagued Tennessee with Garantano. I think even if you don't turn the ball over against Georgia, they lose that game regardless.
Definitely.
But against Mississippi State, it's a winnable game for Tennessee, I think. So it could come down to that, and that's something that they're probably going to try to do is get in his head, rattle him early, get to him, and like Florida did when he was in there, and try to create a fumble or interception.
Well, definitely, and I think obviously it's a different quarterback, but the turnovers have been Tennessee's biggest issue all year. You had 2, I think, in the second half against Georgia State.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad you say that. Even like Georgia, they probably wouldn't have won that game without them. But the one against BYU was huge.
Yes.
Garantano's interception led to BYU's early second half touchdown. A lot of big turnovers in that Florida game.
Right.
The one in the end zone, the Marco Wilson interception down the sideline. They've really dug themselves into some holes. So I definitely think if they want to pull off that upset, they got to keep it low, try to create a couple, which has been a problem for defense as well this year. Yeah. But it's going to be definitely a unique challenge because you look at Tennessee this year, just getting dominated in the second half.
Yes.
I believe losing 75-14, something to that degree in the second half. Now, to be fair, Chattanooga game, they had a lot of backups and they could have run it up in that one if they wanted to. Yeah. But Tennessee's been able to put together a good half of football a couple times this year and just hasn't been able to translate that into the second half, the 4 quarters of football, which I guess you look at the depth on this team, it shouldn't be overly surprising.
Right.
But moving on a little bit, so one of the odder stories in college football this year is Mississippi State. They had these 10 players suspended.
Yeah.
I think they announced that about 2 weeks before season in August camp, something involving some tutor, some academic stuff. But it's 10 players suspended for 8 games, but they're not suspended the first 8 games of the year. Yeah. So I just kind of looked into it a little more this week. I'd seen the story before. So they are announcing who's playing until game day, basically, until they're on the field. Was interesting to see. I saw Logan Lowry was his name. He works for Northeastern Mississippi Daily Journal, was on Tony Basilio radio show this week. Said expected a lot of those guys to play, almost all of them to play this weekend against Tennessee. What were kind of your thoughts on that, and how much do you think that will affect the outcome Saturday?
My thoughts originally when this story came out, because I believe what I had read, and since you heard about it more, or looked at more recently, you might be able to correct me here, but like they were allowed to pick which games that they could or couldn't play in. I mean, my God, if you're an Ole Miss fan or a Missouri fan, you're like, what in the world is up with this? I mean, why do they get to pick who gets to come in and who doesn't? I mean, that seems like a no-brainer. You pick the ones where you need them, like Alabama, Tennessee. They definitely need them for Tennessee because I think Mississippi State's in a place right now, and I wrote about this yesterday. This is a must-win game for them.
Definitely.
I mean, it's a season. I think that I'm kind of going off track here, but I think that Jeremy Pruitt and Joe Moorhead are in a similar place because this Mississippi State team is looking for results. And they had almost a decade of Dan Mullen where he kind of turned things there that just weren't the norm and made them I wouldn't say an SEC championship contender by any means, but
definitely raised the level of that program.
Absolutely. Got them to number 1 in 2014 to get Dak Prescott.
Similar in a lot of ways to what Rick Barnes has done with
Absolutely,
Tennessee basketball.
Absolutely, and it's done great things there. Joe Moorhead comes in. He's a big-time hire. At least that was the perception. Was a head coach at Fordham, obviously. Got into the FBS ranks as an offensive coordinator at Penn State. Did a great job at Penn State under James Franklin. And now they're kind of at a point like they won 8 games last year. They went 8-5. But they should have been better than 8-5. That was they had Nick Fitzgerald, who was regarded as one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC last year, and just completely fell off from where he was, and they just struggled really bad on offense in some games, especially in their losses. So they go 8-5, and then they come into this year, and there's a little bit more hype surrounding them. What Joe Moorhead could do with this system. Fitzgerald's no longer there. But we might have talked about this a little bit later, but then you got 2 quarterbacks. Well, 3, I guess, if you count the guy who was there before. So one of them is a Penn State transfer who was in Joe Moorhead's system and Tommy Stevens. So there was a little bit, there's familiarity there. Maybe the offense can take a step forward this year, and now they're sitting at 3-2. And although their losses don't match Tennessee's, they didn't lose to Southern Miss, which was one of the group of 5 teams they played. But they lost to Kansas, a team they were favored to beat. Kansas, I think flirted with the top 25, but they were beaten the other day.
Yep.
And then Auburn just absolutely demolished them. And that's a Mississippi State even supposed to be pretty good. I know they lost a lot of players from last year, but still supposed to be pretty good. Demolished by Auburn. So it's an interesting game, I think, when you look at it that way, because it's a must-win for them. And Tennessee, I hate to call it a must-win, but if you lose this game, if you're Tennessee, there's still South Carolina. There's still, we talked about this earlier. There's still winnable games on there, but the outlook's going to look worse.
Well, I think what you get into with Tennessee is if you lose Saturday. Right now, it appears they've had some transfers, but the guys are still bought in. You saw that Saturday night. They're playing hard. They seem to believe in Maurer. But you lose Saturday, that's 1-6.
Yeah.
Don't think anyone thinks they're winning in Tuscaloosa. All of a sudden, you get to 1-6, 1-7. Then you get some guys maybe are ready to kind of jump off board, and things start kind of falling apart. And I think that's something you've seen just plague Tennessee this past decade when they haven't been very good.
Yeah.
Is that schedule so front-loaded, by the time you get to the back of the schedule, you have some more winnable games. It feels like the season's already lost.
Yeah.
You lose a lot of the morale of the team, the attention of the team to really fully buy in.
And I think we saw it last year. I was thinking about it this morning. 5-7 they were. It was kind of a similar situation where they're at now. Last year they played Georgia in a game that they went into Athens and everybody said they're going to get blown out. I don't know what the line was for that game. This one was 24.
24, yeah.
And they beat them by 30, 31. So they went into that Georgia game last year with the same perception nationally. They were going to get blown out. They were going to lose. And
I believe that line was about 26 last year, if my memory is correct.
Came in and played pretty well. I mean, Jake Fromm had the strip, early, and Nada picked it up and took it back for a touchdown. And Tennessee, you look like that was deflating, but they came back and they made that an interesting game. It was one like this Saturday night.
Very
had
simple.
some interesting moments, but you never really felt like Tennessee had a legitimate chance to win. But so they had a good game against Georgia last year. I think had the bye week before Auburn, and then beat Auburn out on the Plains. Auburn was ranked at the time. Big win. I kind of feel like that's where they're at right now. You played okay against Georgia. You played better than people expected. You got some positives out of it. Don't celebrate it by any means. You got blown out by a division rival that's just better than you. But, you're kind of in a similar position where you've got some confidence coming into this game. And, that could help. But last year we saw they beat Auburn, and you think, well, look, they're going to lose to Alabama, but they can win out. And they beat Kentucky and then just kind of fell off again. Blown out by Missouri. So I agree with you. It's the past decade. It's just been that way. So this game will be very telling for them. I mean, 1-6, 1-7. It's just who's going to be bought in anymore. That's going to be the biggest issue, especially with a team with so many youngsters on it.
Exactly, and I think you see if you get a win here, I don't think even if they win Saturday that they'll become bowl eligible, but you keep that hope alive. Yeah. You give some teams some stuff to build off of. You can show recruits, hey, we're getting better.
Right.
I think that's a big thing. So I think both of us would agree Jeremy Pruitt's going to keep his job, but if him to have long-term sustained success here, he's got to keep his recruiting class together. He's got to keep things going forward. But you kind of teased it a minute ago. Let's dive into the quarterbacks now.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Moorhead, similar to Jeremy Pruitt last week, isn't going to do anybody any favors by announcing who's going to start. Right. But we've seen Tommy Stevens has played a lot this year as well as Garrett Schrader. How does Tennessee have to prepare for those two quarterbacks? And I don't know if you have any predictions. I don't think either of us really have a great idea who they're going to go with Saturday. But what are your thoughts on those two guys?
Well, I haven't watched a ton of Mississippi State football to know who's better. I know we know Garrett Schrader from the helicopter against Kansas State. And I think you guys listening probably know that play. But if you don't, look it up. The guy got flipped into another dimension, but he seemed to. He's a freshman, I don't know if he's a true freshman or not, or
I believe
redshirt freshman. So he's been in the system for a year now, and I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of them play. I assumed like everybody else, Tommy Stevens was going to come in and win the job. If I remember correctly, there was a lot of good things coming out about him in camp, and he was a guy that played for Joe Moorhead at Penn State, so. That helped because you still have – I don't know how different Dan Mullen and Joe Moorhead's philosophies are. I'm assuming they're a little different. So, you had kind of Mullins, Nick Fitzgerald, and maybe he just didn't mesh well with Moorhead. And Stevens maybe would have done better, but, again, they've had to switch him in and out. So, obviously, Stevens hasn't been the guy or has separated himself as the guy. I don't know, Keontae Thompson, has he played at all?
I don't think he's hardly played any.
Because he was going to transfer and then decided to stay, so I thought maybe that would have been a good sign for them. So I don't know if we'll see him at all Saturday as well. But, I'm trying to think of a scenario this year, or maybe last year too, where Tennessee had to face two quarterbacks. I'd say the closest that they've come to that was against Florida. I mean, Franks was injured the week before, and then you had to prepare for Kyle Trask in a week's time. Now, Tennessee played Chattanooga the week before, and Jeremy Pruitt can tell you what he wants, so I'm assuming they were probably prepping for Florida while they were getting ready for Chattanooga. So they were probably really kind of dialed in on playing Franks, and then Trask thrown out there, and Emory Jones played a little bit, although he wasn't very much of a factor. So it'll be interesting to see how they can handle that two-quarterback system. It doesn't look like it's worked very well for Mississippi State right now, so I don't know. It's kind of weird because – and Tennessee fans will attest to this, they do not do well with backup quarterbacks. So,
no.
And I don't know if I'd classify either of these guys as a backup since they played so much. But, it'll be interesting to see how that defense handles that. I thought that last week Jake Fromm obviously is on a different level than any quarterback. That's the best quarterback they've played so far is Jake Fromm. It's only going to get probably better. I mean, worse for them, Tua next week. So... And then later on, you got Kelly Bryant down the road. So, I don't know. I'll see how they handle that.
Definitely. I think it's kind of funny you're talking about the backup quarterback thing. And Schrader, I guess, isn't really backup. It was backup going into your year behind him and his Tennessee, tell a Tennessee fan, backup quarterback that can run the ball. Like Schrader can. They're going to have flashbacks to Trayon Harris, Matty Mock in 2001 in Georgia. A little bit of everything. And I think that is interesting. I think Schrader does bring a little bit more of a Nick Fitzgerald mold, but obviously, like you were talking about, Fitzgerald, Moorhead came in and was telling Fitzgerald to find a place on his mantle for the Heisman last year, and the offense was a complete bust.
Yeah.
So, I do think it's very interesting what you say about Moorhead. Just kind of adding to that is he's a guy that kind of talked big when he got there, an offensive coach. The offense has just been what's been the issue, though.
Yeah.
He's been so poor. The defense has been good. And I think they're not going to have a horrible season this year. I still think they have enough pieces left on defense, but I think it'll be interesting going forward. They start losing some of these guys. They've had such a good front seven the past 2 seasons. Yeah. How well he can keep things rolling, and he's kind of been speculated. Some rumors he's got some connections to that Rutgers job.
That's true, and that'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Like,
guy
leaving the SEC West for Rutgers, but
it'd probably depend on how things end poorly for him this season.
It's like a Dana Holgorsen situation.
Exactly.
Where he ended up at Houston, but.
And then I guess kind of going one last note we had down here to talk about Kylan Hill leading the SEC in yards after contact. That was a major issue for Tennessee Saturday against Georgia. So that's just definitely something to watch. I don't know if you had any.
Yeah, I mean, we see here 344 yards. And Jeremy Pruitt talked about that. He talked about a couple things on Monday at his press conference where he talked about, he mentioned the 2-quarterback system. He said these are 2 guys that can run and throw. He seemed concerned about that, and he definitely seemed concerned. He didn't mention Kylan Hill by name, I don't think, and I don't think he mentioned their run game specifically, but he talked about against Georgia how just that hurt them. I mean, it kept Georgia, again, I'm trying to be careful what I say because I don't want it to sound like Tennessee was 1 or 2 plays away from beating Georgia, but it kept so many drives alive for Georgia. The yards right at the line of scrimmage, and next thing you know, guys are bouncing it out and going for 10, 15, 20, 30 yards. I mean, it was just insane. And you're going to have a guy that knows how to do that. Again, Saturday, a really good running back there. That he struggled against Auburn, but again, that's a really good Auburn defense. And I think Tennessee's defense is going to be up for a big challenge, especially at linebacker, considering how thin they are there. So, yeah, that's going to be, I think, a big factor in the game. If Kylan Hill has a really good game and Tennessee can't tackle him, I'd say that the favor shifts to Mississippi State drastically. I
think that's kind of the 2 things I'd say to watch for Tennessee on defense to have success. They need to take away the yards after contact for all Mississippi State's players, really, not just Kylan Hill. Obviously, he's the guy we're focusing on. And they got to find a way to create some negative plays. I think Georgia had just 2 negative plays Saturday, and obviously Georgia's offensive line is very good.
Right.
Tennessee was never going to have a tremendous amount of success in that game in the front 7. But that's been a problem for them all year. They have to find a way to create some negative plays. They have to find a way to get Mississippi State into some 2nd and 10s, 2nd and 12, get a sack, 2nd and 15. They got to find a way to this all year, really. It's just been a lot of 3rd and short. They're getting the 3rd down, but they're not getting into winning positions in 3rd down, especially with you look at the depth and just overall skill set of Tennessee's defensive line. That's not, against quality SEC opponents, that's not going to be a down they can win consistently.
The pass rush, too, has got to be there. That's another thing Pruitt mentioned this week. Is like there was one play specifically early against Georgia where Fromm just I mean, he had all day to throw the ball. And if you go in there and you do that with like, again, I haven't watched a ton of Mississippi State football this year, but you can't allow Stevens or Schrader to just sit back there and just, pick out who they want. And because, again, it's a Tennessee defensive line I think has gotten a little better as the years gone on. But if they're not generating any push up front, I don't know if I trust this secondary for Tennessee to make plays. And they haven't this year. They haven't made a lot, made a few, but yeah, there's just so much they're going to have to do on defense. I mean, I know everybody's out there feeling pretty positive just because Mississippi State is probably the worst SEC team Tennessee's had to play this year so far. And I'm not even saying that Mississippi State's all that bad. It's just you've played Florida and Georgia. Now you get a team that looks not as good as Florida and Georgia, but still a team that can beat you. So I just find it hard to see Tennessee doing enough on defense to slow down Kylan Hill and to make plays in the secondary. I think offensively, I mean, that's good Mississippi State defense. I think Georgia's a good defense too, and they made plays in that game. So it'll just have to come down to how they play on defense, really. I think that you got to slow them down, and if you can't, I don't know if your offense is going to be able to make up for that.
Yeah, definitely. So we got it. You're down. You're picking Mississippi State.
Yes.
You want to throw in a score here? We haven't even talked about this. We're going to do a score. But.
Yeah. I probably jumped the gun on that. I'm going to go. We did our pick'ems this week, which you can pick up in the Beacon paper this week. I think I said 24-14. I can see Maurer coming out, throwing a couple touchdowns like he did the other day, getting a couple scoring drives, but I think it's going to be kind of a low-scoring game. And I have Mississippi State by 10.
Okay, yeah. I pointed out I knew we made it for our pick-up to our score game in a week, but I knew I'd pick Mississippi State. I forgot what the score was. So I was like, all right, they're going to call me out if I have a different one. But come back and look at it. I had Mississippi State 24, Tennessee 20.
Yeah.
Similar to you, I think. Yeah. I think Tennessee is going to be able to make this game a 4-quarter game. I just have a hard time. I think Mississippi State's going to be able to run the ball better. And at this point, I think you just look at Tennessee, it's hard to trust what they've been able to do in close games, really, in the whole Pruitt era. There hasn't been a whole lot of them, really. Even the good wins have been significantly kind of, not blowouts, but they've won handedly. But I think Mississippi State pulls this thing out. I don't think Tennessee's defense is going to be able to get quite enough stops.
Yeah.
I think a week for Bob Shoop to look at Brian Maurer, come out with a good game plan, and then I think you add on to that Tennessee's offensive line's a little bit banged up right now. I just don't think that's a great recipe. We don't know exactly who's going to play, who's not going to play on it, but definitely some guys with some looking some cuts and bruises.
Another factor that'll be interesting to keep an eye on is the weather. I mean, it's
definitely.
There's forecasted for rain on Saturday around kickoff, which is at noon. So we'll see. We'll see how much that plays. I saw from practice yesterday they were doing some drills, preparing
drills.
for that.
Yeah.
And it from the word is it wasn't very good. So, so we'll see how the weather affects the game for both teams. But you mentioned it just now, the bye week. I forgot they're coming off a bye week, so another kind of plus there for Mississippi State.
It is an interesting thing, I think. Obviously, it's going to be a plus for Mississippi State coming off a bye, but you think about they just really do just have a week to prepare for Maurer. Yeah, it is kind of a normal way. Now, by mid-Wednesday last week, the news was kind of out that it was looking like Maurer was going to get the start, but obviously he hasn't put anything on tape.
Right.
They can start looking at what he did against Chat in Florida, but definitely a different dynamic to your typical bye week preparations.
And we talk about the two quarterback thing, Mississippi State. I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Tennessee tries to do a little bit of that too. I mean, obviously it happened a little bit because of circumstances. I mean, Maurer took a shot there on the sideline in the third quarter, I think. And Garantano came out and made a nice throw and got a first down.
Definitely. I would say, Pruitt's not saying no doubt that Maurer's your starter. Maurer's the starter, no doubt, Saturday. But I do think Pruitt's comfortable putting Garantano in some certain situations. So, I think that's a good point. I wouldn't be surprised to see that at all. I think that'll be about it for us today. Thank you for joining us on a Checkerboard Chat. I am Ryan Schumpert. With me is Noah Taylor. Hope you guys have a good rest of your night or day.